Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I'm, very excited to do something live. I've spent a lot of time recording Salesforce lessons, and for some of you that have maybe taken my courses, I'm just a voice inside a box. And so it is nice to interact, and I do intend for this to be interactive, and hopefully I'll be able to hear okay if you have questions. I do have time allotted at the end for questions as well. And I think the first challenge for today is to make sure that I'm able to share my screen adequately. So let me try and do that, and let's see if that works. So can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
So are you seeing like a slide deck? Is that what you're seeing?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. All right, very good. So, so what I've called this message today, and this is something new that I've never done before, but it has to do with Salesforce certifications and the silver linings of a cloud career. So I hope to speak to why Salesforce is important. And hopefully this isn't just a time of me preaching to the choir. I mean, with you being in this room, you know about Salesforce, you know why it's important. And I spent a lot of time thinking about our place in time and history as well, and why Salesforce is so powerful for being able to help you reinvent yourself. And so my goal is that you find this time valuable and that will help you in charting your path into the future. And because you got to make decisions all the time, whether you're working on the platform or building an app or building your career as well. So that's what this is about. So with that said, let me see if I can navigate this. All right. So the agenda for this talk is I'm going to talk about my bio as far as some of my background, share my own cloud career journey and some of the things I was involved in prior to Salesforce. And then we'll discuss why Salesforce matters. And I'll be talking about the importance of being a creator instead of a consumer. And we will also discuss the IDC report and some of the future growth of Salesforce and the Salesforce ecosystem, the role of certifications, and charting your path. I'm also going to talk about the 3 types of Salesforce employers and how to target them. And then as time allows in the end, questions, if you have any for me, be glad to do that as well. So let me, oops. I'm like clicking in the wrong place here. So, all right. So for those of you that don't know me, just a brief introduction. I am the founder of Mike Wheeler Media. Started teaching Salesforce online about 3 years ago. I now have over 105,000 students and counting. I recently launched Mike Wheeler Media Plus. That's my own Salesforce learning platform. Launched that last Monday, and as fate would have it, that was also the day that my father passed away. So it was a very memorable day for me. And my father's name was Velza, V-E-L-Z-A. And I've owned that domain name for his name for over a decade. And so, and I've been wondering, well, what do I do with velza.com? And so I wrote a tribute to my father the morning of his funeral, and put that on LinkedIn. And so what I've done is I've set that domain name to redirect to that article. So if you want to check that out or learn more about my father and my thoughts about how he influenced me, you can check that out and, just see what you think about that. But I wanted to make you aware of that as well. So let's talk though about my pre-certification and cloud journey. And I think that I don't want to tell my whole life story because I want to make this about you instead of myself. But I think it's important for you to understand why Salesforce is important. And I've been around the block a few times. I've had to reinvent myself career-wise multiple times. And I think that perhaps some of my own experiences and mistakes will help guide you and avoid some of those mistakes as well. And so as far as my pre-Salesforce journey, though, I started out as a technical writer, and that served me well because I've spent roughly 15 years having to assimilate technical information quickly and then be able to boil it down to its most basic parts and make it accessible, assume no prior knowledge, not talk down to people, those sorts of things. And that training really helped me in what I'm doing now, basically. And then with the advent of Google and search, when that came along, I wanted to get more clients for my technical writing services. And so my goal was to get on page 1 for the search term Nashville Technical Writer. And I'm located in Nashville, Tennessee, by the way. And in those efforts of learning how to game Google, basically, I ended up providing a service or a company for a few years called SEO Page 1. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. And so I had a time where what started out as my goal of just getting more technical writing work led to me doing like a secondary cloud career, if you will. And this was providing a service for others and helping others attain search rankings, okay? And then from there, that process of learning search engine optimization, I started learning WordPress. I didn't know what I was wanting to build, but I knew that WordPress was a way that I could quickly build websites. Prior to learning WordPress, I had learned how to write HTML by hand, and this was in the mid-90s when the internet was reaching the consumers, basically. And that was kind of a rare and valuable skill, if you will, but it was also very painful. And then there were a lot of tools that started to pop up. But it was WordPress was where I had an aha moment that I could just focus on creating a framework, and it would look good. It would be found in search. That was important to me as well. But the important thing to understand here is that this empowered me or gave me the ability to create something. And it's really important to our careers to be able to create rather than just to be another consumer of content. And that's kind of what the masses are doing, and how you can set yourself apart, whether it's Salesforce or WordPress or even some competing product, is finding that way to become what I call a creator in a consumption world. And you maybe have heard me talk about that before or not. So now here, this may be a surprise to you, but I had the ability to create. I learned how to do WordPress. And then whenever the Snuggie, the blanket with sleeves, came along, I had an idea of building a website to where people could submit photos of others wearing Snuggies in public. Now, this was something that I just knew that people would be wearing these out in public. And I felt like the world needed a website for this idea of being able to share on a website pictures of people wearing Snuggies. And so the result of myself being able to execute on an idea led to this website. Now, the cool thing is that when I launched this idea, this stupid idea, it was just pictures of people wearing Snuggies. That website went to the top of Google Trends within the 10th day of its launch. It was just right place, right time. It was featured in USA Today and on CNN. And then from there, it really just was spread all over very quickly. It went semi to moderately viral. That led to me getting into what is known as affiliate marketing. I just launched that to be funny, and I was approached by All Star Marketing, the makers of the Snuggie, and they connected me with their affiliate network, and so I ended up making like $15 or $16 per Snuggie that I referred as far as sales for them. And so that led to a sizable chunk of income, i.e. making money online, making money while you sleep. And so that was really my first cloud career, and this was all pre-Salesforce, okay? Now, these were instrumental milestones in my career, my path, my journey. And you're probably thinking, well, what on earth does this have to do with Salesforce? And it's because of these experiences in recognizing the power of being able to create something and going through all this craziness, which led to people wearing Snuggies and going on pub crawls. And I launched SnuggiePubCrawls.com to document this social phenomenon of people wearing a blanket with sleeves and going bar crawling, basically. And pictured on this slide, if you can see it, is the first ever Snuggie pub crawl, which was in Cincinnati, Ohio. And that picture went very viral as well. So with that said, the reason that this matters, this ability to create, is the importance of becoming a creator in a consumption world. We live in a world where everyone is easily bored, the attention spans grow shorter by the day, and basically we are surrounded by people that just want to consume content. Now, they want to consume content either to be amused or entertained or educated, and that would be more where I fall into this ecosystem of creator versus consumer, just out there in the world. But why this is important to your Salesforce career is that you need to have the ability to have relevant skills in the economy of now. Now, I don't know why I always capitalize the word now, but what I see from where I sit, and coming from a background of being a technical writer and watching those skills grow more irrelevant with the advent of, you know, kind of an economic collapse or economic troubles in 2008. And then soon thereafter, the advent of the iPad, and I saw that if you made a product well, there wasn't a lot of need for a manual. And so this is what led me down the path of trying to figure out, okay, what can I do to enhance my skills to have more relevance in the economy of now? And it was in a Barnes and Noble bookstore that I discovered a Salesforce book. And that's what led me to learning Salesforce. And this was in 2012. This was not that long ago. And I saw this as a way of trying to reinvent myself. This was something that I felt like I could do. And Salesforce does truly empower anyone to be able to execute on an idea. And these ideas can be your own ideas or the ideas of others. And much like, and the reason I brought up Snuggie, and this is something I'm not really talked publicly about, it's one of those things where, like, do I talk about this or not? But because I had learned how to do WordPress and didn't really know what I was going to do with that knowledge, then when I did have an idea, I was able to hit the ground running and bring something to reality, and it made an impact out in the world. And kind of the goal that I had with Snuggie was to help make it more popular, and I'm doing the same with Salesforce. I am trying to not only empower you to advance in your career or pass a certification, but also to bring new people into the ecosystem. And I think it's very important to understand this, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this Salesforce Ohana and this family of individuals, and everyone is so helpful. And it's unlike anything I've seen out there in other technical circles. And that's because there is such an abundance of jobs that we don't have this scarcity mindset where we have to be careful of, you know, sharing too much knowledge because it may endanger our own job. The opposite of that is the reality, in that the supply versus demand as far as Salesforce jobs just continually grows in our favor, which leads to this free flow of information that we see out there in the ecosystem. All right. So the ability to execute on ideas, whether they're your own or others, leads to you having a lot of options. And even just being a creator, whatever it may be, you almost, I look at it as almost like you're a modern day artist, and you treat your career and what you build as art. And the ability to create something where there wasn't something, to solve problems, to solve those puzzles, gets me excited. So, all right. So not only that, but another reason why it's important to be a creator in a consumption world is because Salesforce is not a fad. It's not like the Snuggie. And I remember whenever all of that was, oops, what did I do there? Oopsie, hang on. So I remember when all of the Snuggie madness was going on, I knew in the back of my mind this was not going to last long. Now, Salesforce is not a fad. You may know, you may not know, but they've been around 20 years now, and they've reached a maturation point to where we see Salesforce getting into specific verticals, which is a beautiful thing, just industry-specific cloud solutions. And, you know, I've thought about as well, because I've gone really all in with Salesforce for my career, doing all these things that I'm doing. And I thought, well, what would happen if there was some huge scandal for Salesforce? I have been around the block a few times. I've seen large companies go away seemingly overnight because of scandal or financial problems or whatever. Now, I see no signs of that for Salesforce. There's no indicators of that. But even if, worst case scenario, we woke up tomorrow and Salesforce was gone, that we have ways of transferring those skills. It's not the end of the world. We are attaining, as we learn Salesforce, cloud skills. These are highly attainable, they're invaluable, and they're transferable. And what really spoke to me whenever I was standing in the nerd aisle of the Barnes & Noble bookstore just 7 years ago, and first cracking open a book about Salesforce, and I realized that this was an attainable path. Now, I've got on my bookshelf here in my home office all these other technology books that, like Java and Ruby on Rails, and you name it, I've got books on it. And I can tell where I hit a wall with those based on where the bookmark resides to this day in those books. I would hit a certain point and it just became this hurdle that I couldn't overcome. And when I saw Salesforce, I saw that this was something that was the most attainable path to a cloud career that I could imagine. Now, these skills are transferable as well. And when you're learning something on the Salesforce platform, you may end up becoming a Salesforce administrator or a developer or a consultant or business analyst. You may find yourself doing something for a competing product. Even I've got students that have attained their certifications, or perhaps they've not even attained a certification yet, and they reach out and say, hey, I've got an opportunity to be a CRM analyst, but it's for some competing product. And they almost are apologetic, like, should I do it or not? And, I don't have stock in Salesforce. I'm not a Salesforce employee. To me, it is the most attainable path to the cloud career. But the goal is not to enrich Salesforce. The goal is to enrich you and to enrich your life and your career, to do work that matters. And so as you learn these skills, whether that path takes you down some unexpected turn, or perhaps you're even doing or using Salesforce for a season, just know that it is an attainable path. The skills you are acquiring are invaluable, and they are transferable if the cloud ecosystem begins to shift. The future looks certainly bright, and I'm planning on talking about this IDC report about how bright the future is for Salesforce. But I know and I recognize it's human nature to worry about the future. And so just know that you don't need to worry about a specific company. Just know or have confidence in yourself that what you're doing today is an investment in your future, and it is transferable and will make a difference. So, how are we doing so far?
Awesome.
Good? Okay. Because I can just keep going and going and going, but I just want to make sure that we're doing all right. So the IDC report. Now, there was one of these released a few years ago, and Salesforce recently commissioned a new report. This is a third-party company called IDC, and they investigated what the Salesforce ecosystem is looking like. Now, Salesforce ecosystem would be Salesforce as a company, and then other companies that use Salesforce. And between now and 2024, it's anticipated that the ecosystem is going to generate an additional 4.2 million new jobs. So what that means is this supply versus demand imbalance just is continually growing in our favor. Now, some of you in the room there probably discovered Salesforce before I did, but I have been around now for about 7 years. And I remember when I was starting out and talking with coworkers, it's kind of like, can you believe how good this space is? And we were wondering how long it would last, and talk of, well, enjoy it while it lasts. It's not going to last forever, and it is clear that nothing lasts forever, of course. But what I have seen personally is that this demand versus supply of Salesforce talent has just grown more and more in our favor over these past 7 years. As well, the Salesforce ecosystem is set to generate 1.2 trillion in new business revenues between now and 2024. And I've got a link to the IDC report and the press release for Salesforce on that as well. And I've made this slide deck available to your group leaders there as well. And we can get this slide deck distributed to you after the fact so that you can access all these links. We're getting ready to get into a bunch of links. And I think that I remember when I was starting out, even before I created my first course, I was just trying to tell friends or family or anyone that had a pulse that stopped moving long enough. I would tell them, you need to do Salesforce, because it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. And so it's nice to have some resources other than just me saying it to point to, or other voices saying, this is a huge opportunity, this is important, this is significant. It's good to have data around this rather than just basing it on the 75 to 100 phone calls I used to get from recruiters every week looking, and this is before I was teaching, but this is before I had any sort of following or student base or whatever, just because my LinkedIn profile, my resume had Salesforce on it. And if you really build that presence, you can really get bugged to death by recruiters. So I knew empirically, just from my own personal data, that that demand was increasing with every passing year. But now we have these reports that are done that are very helpful. So for those of you that are newer to this ecosystem, I think that this is highly important for you to recognize and understand, because it does sound too good to be true, but it is true and it is reality. And that's why I also, just a quick aside, is I try to interview my students when I can and to have them share their story. And I will share towards the end of this my YouTube channel, among other things. And you will find on there interviews that I've done and continue to do with individuals that were formerly homeless, for example, people that are working as Salesforce administrators into the age of 70 for Fortune 500 companies. And the reason that I do that is because we all have a tendency to think, I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm not technical enough, I don't have an IT background. I've heard it all. And so I'm trying to just share with the world that this is attainable. And that is why I do what I do. And remember when I talked about my goal was to add value when I was pushing the Snuggie and bringing new people into that universe. And that's what I'm doing, or trying to do for Salesforce, is to add value so that this ecosystem can continue to grow. Because I believe that the biggest threat, if you want to know what the biggest threat to Salesforce is, it's not a competitor, it's a lack of talent, it's a lack of humans. And what will make a company decide to go with one of these inferior products would be a lack of talent. And they can find implementation experts in these other arenas, but not with Salesforce. So, you know, you may think with me being out there and others that are pushing these certification courses, et cetera, oh, you're going to saturate the market. The market is not saturated. And so if I felt like I was doing more harm than good, I would stop doing it. I would pivot to something else. So I've been pivoting my whole life, and I would just pivot into other fields if need be. But for now, it's a great place to be. So, all right, so let's talk about some of these certification tips. You know, that was, this is titled Certification Tips and the Silver Linings of a Cloud Career. So I would say that about 90 to 95% of individuals typically start with the administrator certification. And it's there that you learn the fundamentals. And some of you that are new, and I don't know what the makeup of the room is there as far as grizzled veterans versus newbies or whatever, but if this is old news to you, then share it with others or whatever. But learning the fundamentals is important. And I've seen as well those that just go straight to developer track, and that's how I started. I saw the need to kind of backtrack and learn the fundamentals of the platform. I didn't understand security. I didn't understand sharing rules or profiles, permission sets, and reports and dashboards and all these things that I kept getting hit with. So I decided to kind of do the moonwalk backwards, and as far as from developer, and address some of the fundamentals and really learn what can be done declaratively with clicks instead of code. So starting with the admin certification is typically the best place to go. And then from there, really think about the type of employer you are targeting. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, but basically you can boil down all Salesforce employers into 3 different buckets, and I'll talk about those 3 types here momentarily. And then I just have to say, if you have the ability to code, by all means do code. It is like having an ATM machine in your bedroom, because that is where the most jobs are. That's where the most scarcity is as far as Salesforce talent, is for developers. Now, if you're not able to code or have no interest in that, don't despair. There's plenty of other jobs in other arenas for administrators, consultants, business analysts, project managers, etc. But I think it is worthwhile for you as a Salesforce aspiring professional or professional is to at least investigate Apex and Visualforce and Lightning Components, Lightning web components. Start going down that path, maybe get on Trailhead a little bit and see if it clicks or not. You don't know what you don't know or what you've not tried. And so a lot of this journey starting out, we talked about administrator for the fundamentals being the first certification to target, but a lot of this is sampling things. It's almost like a buffet line of skills and just seeing what you really take to and kind of follow those interests. And it may take you to some surprising places, all right? And then another thing that you can do, and I think that I see a lot of my students pass the first certification, 95% of the time it's admin. And I see some of my students then have a big now what moment and they have difficulty getting hired. And they say, oh, there's no admin jobs out here or it's saturated in this space. So I encourage those individuals to look at their past to help determine their future. What I mean by that is unless you're fresh out of high school or college, you have some sort of work experience probably, unless you have some large gap. Perhaps you've been a caregiver or a stay-at-home parent or something like that, and you may have a 20-year gap or whatever. So you may not have a lot on your resume, but if you have much of anything, you can identify what industries you have experience with. Now, why this is important is you can then take those industries you've worked in and realize or recognize or embrace, rather than trying to hide that background of that experience, but embrace your past so that you can be looked upon as a subject matter expert, whether that's maybe in the healthcare space or higher education or manufacturing or whatever. Now, that's huge because it's easier to add Salesforce to your skills toolbox than to try to change both your primary industry that you've worked in and the primary technology, that being Salesforce. Now, I have a note on this slide here. I encourage you to look at the various implementation guides. Now, I happen to reside in the Nashville, Tennessee area. And in this area, beyond country music, the primary industry here is healthcare for whatever reason. And there's a lot of people in my walks of life that I run into that they know of me in the Salesforce space. They're looking to reinvent their career and they work for a healthcare company. And so what I'm advising those individuals to do, and these are people that I know personally, is to get the administrator certification and then look at the Health Cloud implementation guides, because that walks you through how to do a full-blown implementation of the Health Cloud. Now, perhaps your background is financial services or higher education, whatever it may be. And as time progresses, Salesforce has a cloud offering around those different industries and verticals. And that's because after the 1,000th or 10,000th or 100,000th implementation for a healthcare company inside the Salesforce platform, Salesforce begins to see commonly recurring themes, and they then start adding a layer on top of the fundamentals that you would learn inside of the admin certification, and they slap the word cloud at the end of it, and this is now the health cloud. This is the financial services cloud. This is the manufacturing cloud. This is the integration cloud. So whatever background you have, really think about that. And early on, even for myself being a technical writer, I really had this strange challenge in trying to make this pivot into Salesforce and calling myself a Salesforce developer or Salesforce consultant, and I tried different things. But I had to look at, okay, what are the specific verticals that I've worked in, and then cater my resume towards that, so that when someone is, you got to always think about the person on the other side of the desk. And if you have scant Salesforce experience, but you have a wealth of knowledge in a specific vertical, then it's not going to be nearly as hard for them to make the logical leap that they could see you as succeeding in this space. But if you don't have the industry background and you don't have the Salesforce experience, that's a lot harder. So just a little tip there, look for the implementation guides, even if there's not a certification yet, much like Health Cloud. I don't think there's a certification yet for that one. I'm trying to keep up with what all the certifications are that are out there. But typically, if there is a cloud offering, and you can look on Salesforce's website for the different offerings they have, there's typically a implementation guide. All right, so let's talk about the 3 types of Salesforce employers. Now, you can boil this down to just 3 types of employers. You either have Salesforce customer companies, and those are companies that use Salesforce for their either marketing, sales, or service. And if it is a Salesforce customer company, and if it is a company that you desire to work for, you just look at or figure out what is their primary cloud that they use. And that was one of the questions I always asked when I was being approached by recruiters was, is this a marketing cloud, sales, or service cloud? And a lot of times companies will use all three, but almost always one of these will be the primary. So if you're sitting here at this point in time watching this, whether live or on replay, if you already have the admin certification, and if there is some company that you would love to work for, maybe the building looks cool, or it'd be an easy commute, or it would be a prestigious thing on your resume and you would like to spend 5 years with that company or whatever, then do a little investigation, find out what they're using, and then you can target the consultant certifications around marketing, sales, or service, and position yourself. And this may be a 3 to 6 month to a year type of proposition, but if you have some end goal in mind, just think strategically about what your next certification is. Now, the second type of Salesforce employer would be Salesforce partner companies. Now, we mentioned previously the first type is a customer company, but typically customer companies don't just buy Salesforce and have the ability to implement this on their own. And so Salesforce partner companies are implementation experts. And then it's important as well to understand how these partner companies are scored. This will have an impact on your certification journey. Now I've got this big long link here, but you can find this if you just search for Mike Wheeler Charting Your Path. And as I mentioned, the slide deck will be available after the fact. We'll get this to you if you're interested. And in that article, though, I describe, and let's see if I can pull this up so let's see how this goes, so that you're looking at something else. So can you see my website?
Yes.
Awesome. So I posted this about a year and a half ago, and I'm not going to read all this to you, but basically I go into detail on how Salesforce partner companies are scored at 45% of that equation. And these numbers may have changed a little bit. I've got an updated link to their methodology for fiscal year 2020. But it's in this area here in the middle as far as expertise and certification specifically. With partner companies, part of the equation that they're scored upon has to do with the certifications that their consultants hold. And these certifications are worth different points. And so I go into all the details of this and how to discern and read all of the nitty gritty, more detail than you would care to probably read. But some certifications are worth more points than others, such as architect certifications are worth 25 points, consultants certifications worth 3, and then some of the others are worth 1, and considered expanded knowledge certifications, such as Platform App Builder, Advanced Administrator, Platform Developer 2, which I don't understand that one. That one to me should be worth a lot, but it is what it is. And as you consume this information, you will see that Salesforce wants their partner companies to stockpile consultants and architects. So this article, I don't make any conclusions at the end of this. I just say, may you go forth and use this as a reference to make your own decisions, because everyone's different. I understand that. I get that. And so that article, though, is, I think, a helpful tool, especially if you're wanting to target a partner company. Now, partner companies are huge because they get a lot of work. They get a lot of referrals from Salesforce, and you get a lot of experience working on a lot of different things. You will maybe working on Marketing Cloud one day and Service Cloud the next. And also, oh, by the way, as you're working for a partner company, you might start to think in the back of your mind, I could start one of these one day myself. This could start you down the path of starting your own company and becoming a partner and going forth and doing likewise. Now, I'm not going to encourage you to compete against, in the future, your employer or whatever, but I do recognize that that is an attainable path for many of you sitting at this table. Is if you have the dream of being entrepreneurial and you've thought, well, what can I do in this space? And maybe, well, I'm going to teach like Mike does or whatever. Or another option would be starting your own partner company. And that is very attainable, very doable. And one good way to learn how to do that is to spend a few years inside the walls of a partner company. All right, so let me get back on it here. Now, if you want to target a partner company, remember I talked about embracing your past to empower your future, basically looking at your resume, your experience, what have you done, what industries have you worked in, and then, oh, by the way, you can filter these partner companies by industry or vertical. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but you can filter the partner companies by healthcare or higher education or nonprofit, et cetera, et cetera. You get the gist of this. And that will give you a list then of all the partner companies in the Salesforce ecosystem that specialize in that vertical. From there, what you could do is you could figure out how to target them. That might be at local meetups. That might be trying to figure out or look at from their website who some of their customers are. All of these partner companies do an implementation, and then at some point, all of these companies want to get rid of the partner company and develop in-house talent. This is a clue of companies that you can target, not just the partner company, but those that are former customers of them that they highlight as a success story. Most partner companies have a list of logos of whom they've done work for. Those are all companies that you could then pursue, knowing that they're using Salesforce and they're in the vertical that you're strong in. So you can at least speak to the lingo, be looked at as a subject matter expert. And if you're newer to Salesforce, at least you have the industry expertise and you're showing the initiative of adding another tool to your toolbox, that means Salesforce, all right? So filter by industry on the App Exchange, little tip for you. Now, the type of partner companies, and we'll get to the third type here in a moment, but the type of partner companies, and this is important to understand as well. There's two types of partner companies. I don't know why I did that. It looks a little jazz handish, but two types of partner companies. ISVs, known as independent software vendors, or consultants, or companies that do both, create software and do consulting. Now, in the companies that I've analyzed and researched in this space, usually they start out as a consultant company. And then over time, after a dozen or 2 dozen implementations of typically the same thing, they will then begin to build apps. These are assets that they have to offer that will help them to land new business in the consulting space, because they've done similar for like 2 dozen healthcare companies, for example, or they've done 2 dozen health cloud implementations. And I'm thinking Nashville here, where I'm at, I know of partner companies here in town that specialize in healthcare, and they start out as a consultant company, just doing implementations, just focused on billable hours. But then over time, because of the work they've done, they're able to package things up on the App Exchange, sell it, and that's another revenue stream, and that's also another selling point as to why you should go with our partner company rather than a competitor, because we have these highly reviewed and rated apps on the App Exchange. I'm throwing all this at you because this is what heads of partner companies are thinking about. And they're looking at you and your certifications and how many points you would bring to the table for them, and helping them reach from silver to gold to platinum status, for example. But then as well, this may be an option for you as far as starting your own partner company and kind of giving you a roadmap of just starting off or focusing on getting clients, billing hours. But as you do these implementations, start thinking about entering into the app space and getting into the ISV realm as well. But if all you're interested in is working as an admin consultant, developer for one of these partner companies, you will understand or be at the interview table understanding what their business model is and how you can make that to your advantage as you're answering their questions, so that they can see that you get it and you would fit in the culture, etc. All right. Third type of Salesforce employer is the mothership. It would be Salesforce themselves. I just saw recently there was a Salesforce Texas tower that was opened in Dallas. And Salesforce is now getting into the business of reshaping skylines or branding themselves across different cities across the globe. And this is a smart move because people don't know what Salesforce is. It is probably the largest unknown company I've ever seen. And then they've kind of outgrown their name, frankly, in some ways, but I think they're too far gone to rebrand or just drop the sales and just go by force. But there's a lot of jobs out there for professionals inside of Salesforce across the globe. And I know that I have a lot of Salesforce employees that have a lot of internal resources that still cross my hemisphere, because as they are hired, perhaps as a customer success manager, there's different roles and job types that require those individuals to attain what I call the fundamental 5 Salesforce certifications in their first 6 months. That would be admin, advanced admin, platform app builder, sales cloud, and service cloud. So depending on who you want to target, whether it's Salesforce, a Salesforce partner company, or a Salesforce customer company, use that information that I've just shared to help you to determine what the next best or logical certification is after you do admin. All right. So, so just as an aside or an FYI, and you may have noticed it, you may not have, but whenever you create your web assessor account for registering for the exams, Salesforce or Web Assessor wants to know, okay, are you a Salesforce employee, or you work for a partner company, or are you a customer? So that's just kind of validation that that's really the 3 types of employers, because that's what Salesforce is interested in whenever you're pursuing certifications as well. All right, so let's talk about test taking strategies, all right? And before we get into the actual test itself, we need to talk about some of the pre-test tips. And so I always encourage my students to go into a test with a coin toss mentality. Now, hopefully you've got a better than 50-50 shot of passing, but I think that it's good to avoid the extremes here as you go into taking a test. Whether it's your first certification or your 10th, just having some sort of even-keeled attitude, just recognizing that you may pass, you may fail, and that if you do fail, the sun will come out tomorrow. Not to be too much like Annie, but if you do fail, you can try again, and you will learn a lot from the process as well. Now, another thing that's important is I encourage people to not tell their boss or their coworkers that they're getting ready to take the test. Because if you do that, then let's say that you make it known Friday late in the day, like, hey boss, hey coworkers, I'm taking the test tonight or this weekend. The first question everyone's going to be asking you on Monday morning is, how did the test go? And that's going to hit you when you're in the middle of the test, and if you're starting to have doubts as to if you're going to pass or not. The test taking process is stressful enough. You don't need to add undue stress on yourself worrying about, what am I going to tell Betty? What am I going to tell Bob? What am I going to tell my boss that I actually didn't pass? They don't understand how hard this is. And so it's all about getting in the right mental landscape for the test so that you don't have distractions. You're not worrying about that and not putting undue pressure on yourself. So keep it a secret. No one can see if you failed. All they can see is through verification. If you opt in for the certification verification, that's a fun thing to say 3 times fast, is what certifications you hold. And so I always encourage people just kind of keep it a secret until you've passed. Now, once you're taking the actual exam, we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. And remember, I'll have time for questions here in just a moment. We're about done here, and you've been very patient while I've just kind of rattled on, but use the full allotted time. Typically, the test is either 90 minutes or 105 minutes, specifically for admin, but for most tests, you will have 90 minutes and 60 questions. If there's some ungraded questions, and this is Salesforce's way of testing out new questions that are ungraded, and they will see which are good performing test questions to be in future actual exams to be graded. They may hit you with 65 questions and they give you an additional 15 minutes. I don't like that Salesforce does this, because this also puts undue pressure on you, because you will have newer concepts and things that maybe you never heard of. And this will cause you to, I've had students reach out to me and say, I think I'm taking the wrong test because there were 2 things I never even heard of before. And typically, if you encounter that, if you have fully prepared, if you've worked through like my coursework or done the admin trail mix, and you're really fully preparing, you shouldn't have any surprises on the exam. If you do, probably it's an ungraded question if you've got 105 minutes. But about using the fully allotted time is why that's important is that you want to do your first pass as quickly as you can. This is my own advice on how I've helped others pass the test, and this was starting with myself and then with others such as my son, is that this first pass, you just go with your gut reaction. If you're not sure, just mark it for later review. You can mark the questions for later review, and then after the 60 questions, if you have 20 or less that are marked for later review, you're probably in pretty good shape and you're probably going to pass. So you mark those for later review, and then the second pass, you would go through and address just those that you were unsure of and spend more time on those and think about those and look to see if you can discern what the right answers are. And you can also then, after you've done the second pass, marking for later review, if you have time, then just start over from the very beginning and go 1 through 60, beginning to end, read the questions, check your answers, and re-review your answers. You may have misanswered something, and I've done this personally where I know that I clicked C, but when I re-review, I actually clicked A, and it was obviously wrong, and it gave me the chance to spot my error. We're all human. We misclick, the click misregisters, or we just accidentally mess something up, you know. So, and then just going over every question as time allows. And then when you're doing that, look for like-kind questions. And I've seen this happen as well, where there's some concept that I don't feel strong in, and I see it pop up again later in the test, and then just finding those, and it may be question 2 and question 59, and just toggling back and forth between those two questions and the different answers that are possible. That will help you to draw things out of the memory banks that will help you to determine, okay, I think this is the right answer here and here, and it's hard to discern until you look at both of them together, all right? And then with this hour and a half, memorize as much as you humanly can. You really want to try to commit as much to memory, because remember, you're going into this with a coin toss mentality. You may pass, you may fail, but it's important to take the full allotted time so that in case you do fail, you spend the time memorizing as much as possible, so that then after the exam, if you pass, you celebrate. If you fail, you don't feel sorry for yourself. You do what I call a brain dump. And this is a 2-pass process for brain dump. And I've done this myself. I've failed my first certification exam, and I stumbled into this process because I was having to drive an hour home from the testing center, felt sorry for myself, called my wife, poor me. And I think she suggested that I record on voice memo while I'm driving for an hour, everything I can remember from the test. I'm like, that's a good idea. So I did that, and a lot of it was just stream of consciousness. I remember a question about campaign influence, and one of the answers was contact roles. And I remember something about whatever it may be. And then once you've exhausted your memory, take a second pass by looking at the exam guide and each individual bullet point from the exam guide. And I mean, do this before you tell anyone, even your loved ones, whatever, that you failed, before you even get up or whatever. Or if you're in a testing center, do it in your car or whatever. But then the second pass with the exam guide, the bullet points will trigger your memory some more and get all that recorded. And I like doing voice memos because the act of typing distracts my thoughts. But if I'm talking out loud, I find that I get more out that way. So you may be able to record the essence of the concepts of what you just experienced. Now, the idea behind this is not to cheat, but just to help guide your studies, because you will receive knowledge area feedback and percentages for each knowledge area. So you can identify the areas you scored poorly in that are weighted heavily, and then look at your notes from what you remember on the exam, and that will tell you and guide you on what areas you need to readdress. And then your future looks like this. It's scheduling a follow-up exam like a week later while it's all fresh, especially before there's the next release of Salesforce that comes out, because they also release a new version of the test and some of the questions will go away. You will have some repeat questions on the exam as well. So that's why it's helpful to record everything you can remember and just kind of go from there. All right. So let's bring it in for a landing. I've got a lot of resources. I've got dozens of courses. And as I mentioned at the top of this time, I did launch Mike Wheeler Media Plus on December 2nd, happened to be the day that my father passed away. it was quite a memorable day for me, to say the least. And so learn.micromedia.com is where that's at. I do encourage you to watch the trailer for that, so you can kind of comprehend what I'm doing and why this is the next big thing as far as what I see as the future of learning Salesforce. And then another thing I have coming up is doing live classes, much like what I've done here, but with a lot more interactivity and clicking around in Salesforce and teaching things related to the admin exam. Live admin class starts January 7th. And remember, these links will be available in the slide deck. We'll make that all available to you. And I'll be posting it online probably somewhere. You'll probably run across it somewhere. I also have a free Salesforce Career Paths course. And I go into a lot more detail in that course about what it looks like to be a Salesforce project manager, business analyst, some of the things other than admin. If you remember, I talked about people getting the admin certification saying, now what? This is the now what. And this is a way to differentiate yourself from the thousands of others that have just the admin certification and no job and no experience. And so you check that out as well. And then be sure and connect with me on LinkedIn. I did write an article, a tribute for my father who passed away, on December 2nd. And you can get to that through this LinkedIn profile, or just go to blvd.com, and that will redirect you to that article, and then you can connect with me. What I do as well on LinkedIn is if you pass certifications and give me a shout out, I'll endorse your skills, and that will bring a lot of recruiters your way and a lot of profile visits, and it's kind of like a hockey stick. I've had students share their profile views, and not just myself, they'll shout out to others, and just the act of passing a certification gets a lot of attention. But what I try to do to help you garner more views is I like the post, and I comment, and I endorse, okay? And I do verify the certification. So don't say, hey, I passed the certification, and lie. And then YouTube channel, a lot of videos there, a lot of interviews, a lot of success stories, some how to do this in Salesforce, how to do that, here's new things. But a lot of it anymore this is almost like a podcast with video where I'm interviewing people from all walks of life. And that's what I'm looking for, are people that reinvented themselves, especially from difficult circumstances, to be an inspiration to others. And I can't speak to everyone's circumstance. And so I'm trying to find those of you out there that have a story to share. And so reach out to me if you want to be interviewed. I'm working on ways to do that more and more. And beyond that, I have a student group of approaching 8,000 of my students in a Facebook student group. This is useful for those of you that don't want to post on the Trailblazer community. That has millions of users, and I know personally there's things that I felt like in the past, I should really know this. I don't know if I want to post this publicly and admit I don't know this, because my employer might see this and think, oh, well, what am I paying him for? He doesn't know how to do this or whatever. So this is a more private, it's like a group inside a group, if you will, to get some support and some help without it being blasted out to the whole Trailblazer community. And also you can actually message people inside of Facebook if you see someone that's providing value. So with that said, I think I've talked long enough, but I have another slide. I'm more and more slides. Trail mixes, I've got my own trail mix for the admin certification. I've not done any other trail mixes for any other certifications. And then Salesforce has their own trail mix as well. Those are good for giving you guidance on what you need to cover. All right, so enough from me. And I'm not sure how much time we have here. I know you've been eating pizza and that looked very yummy. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, and hopefully I can hear you.
Ask your question. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Hi, Mike. I am a longtime Salesforce user, not certified, and I've been interested in getting certified for a long time. I was wondering, like, outside of your resources that you've prepared, like I've been having trouble finding like the book, or what's on the current test, or what's the complete, things that you will be tested on from Salesforce. Outside of the stuff maybe that you've prepared, because I'm definitely gonna check out all your content.
Right. So yeah. There is a book. I think this would be useful, even though it's more for a user. I'm kind of hesitant to recommend it because of the title, Salesforce for Dummies, but I actually bought that book whenever I was creating my user courses, because I spent a lot of hours, after doing several classes and working for years on the platform, trying to answer the question, what is Salesforce? So I think that is a good resource. There used to be a book called The Force.com Fundamentals that up to about the middle of it had everything on the admin exam, and then the second half had what used to be on the Force.com developer certification. And I referenced that a lot when I was having to build my first approval process. And I'm more of a book guy, coming from a technical writing background. I like books and being able to reference things, printed material. I thought about making in book form my courses and just screen capturing and making workbooks. And I'm looking at doing something like that perhaps on My Cooler Media Plus if there's enough demand for that. I thought about writing a book. I've been approached by like Pact Publishing to do that. It's so other books.
Or just general resources out there that, maybe. I want to know that what I'm studying is the stuff that I need to know for the exam. And not like
right, waste of time or whatever. I really try to, like in my own courses, I go by the exam guide, knowledge area by knowledge area, and then bullet point by bullet point. And there's some things that I'm anticipating that will be on the exam in the future for newer things. And so I think that that's a good resource. The trail mix that I provide, the trail mix that Salesforce provides. I think that Salesforce's trail mix is a little bit of overkill and a little bit too much, and maybe not in the best of order. Now that's my own theory, and everyone's got their thoughts on how best to learn. But and then I've got practice tests. There's other practice tests out there. I would say don't use flashcards or Quizlets. Those are I think that Salesforce is putting out false information in those spaces so as to confuse people back to the source, which would be Trailhead and the online help system. And then Web Assessor has a practice test that is actually harder than mine. And but I think that, if you go through those sorts of things, you'll be well prepared. And then also, I guess if it's something that's not necessarily on the test, it may be on the next test that you take, whether that be Platform App Builder or Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Build Service Lightning, whatever. You don't want to get too far deep in the weeds, though. So,
thank you.
What other questions?
I have a question. I don't know if you can hear me, Mike, but just curious, how much time would you say you should take preparing before the exam? Should it take a month, 3 months, 6 months?
So I would say the average for people is 3 to 6 months and 100+ hours of focused study, probably closer to 150 to 200 hours. I've seen people online that say, hey, I'm new to Salesforce and I passed the test in a week. I think those people are cheating. I think they're they've gotten a test or an exam dump of the actual questions, or they are just doing trivia-based learning where they got a copy of the question somehow, but they don't understand the concepts. And so what I've always tried to do in my teaching is to convey the concepts rather than it being like trivia night at Old Chicago or something like that. And so I would say 3 to 6 months, 150-ish hours is pretty ballpark. Also, don't compare yourself to others. Everyone's different. I've got people, and there are people that I know personally that failed the admin exam 8 or 9 times, and now they are killing it with their career, have more certifications than I do, doing things that I don't know how to do. And so it's not how you start, it's just you keep going, So anyway.
Thank you.
What else?
What, Mike, like what is your course structure?
What is what?
What is the structure of your course?
The structure of my courses? So I structure my certification courses after the exam guide. So it's by knowledge area. And it goes in the order of the knowledge, the different knowledge areas in the exam guides. So you'll find the exam guides now on Trailhead. They used to have PDF versions of these that were downloadable, and I was always having to update those on my resource links. But now if you just go to Trailhead and you go to the credential areas, let me stop sharing my screen and let me just see. All right, can you just see me now?
Yeah.
We can just talk. So, so in those exam guides by knowledge area, I realized as I was putting together my first course back in 2016, that Salesforce put a lot of thought into the structure of that exam guide. And that was a big clue to me. And I really leveraged my tech writing background to understand that these were going in a certain order for a reason, and these bullet points were there for a reason. So that's how I structure it. And I also, another thing that throws people is, like on the admin exam, for example, it may be like a 2% weighting for collaboration, i.e. chatter on the admin exam. But then people say, Mike, you know, I had 10 questions on chatter on the exam. That's because they may be testing something related to security and they choose to represent chatter as the context for that security question. And so there's certain concepts that are revisited. So early on in most of my courses, because of this is how it falls in the exam guide particularly, is something about security. But then as we're talking about the object model, for instance, we also have to revisit security again. And then when we're talking about collaboration, we got to revisit security. And so you'll see that it's kind of layer by layer. I call it like ironing the shirt, which I didn't iron my shirt, so I probably look really wrinkly. But in my structure of courses, I do approach it like ironing a shirt, where we do a pass and then we take it with another angle or another context, and that's another pass through, and it becomes more clear over time. So that's how I structure the courses.
Thank you.
That. What other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So after taking your admin live course, how prepared would someone be for the exam, or how much additional studying do you think would be required?
I would say very prepared, because the way my live class, and of course I'm going to say that. I mean, it's like, well, I don't want you to leave feeling like you're like Ralphie in Christmas Story, where he gets his decoder pin and it just says drink more Ovaltine. And you're like, oh, it's a crummy commercial. So hopefully you get that reference. You may not, I don't know. The nice thing about doing live, and I've seen this even with people I know personally or friends, is, you know, there's some interest in the pre-recorded stuff, but it's the live to where you can ask questions and get them answered, or someone else asks a question you never even thought of. And then another thing that's nice is it forces me to revisit these topics over and over and over to see what is new, what is something that is popped up on the radar that I didn't record in the pre-recorded stuff. Now I go back in and add that content and update those courses, but oftentimes there's things that I discover that day and I go live. So, and then how this works is I teach live on concepts that I feel like need another pass of the ironing of the shirt, the newer things, and then I assign as homework the pre-recorded content. And so the pacing and the structure of that, and because I am sitting on all these video assets, I am able to leverage all that I've created in the past to then structure, okay, now where we sit approaching 2020, how would I do this? And so, okay, for this week I would do these, this week I would do these. And so I have structured it to be a 9-week journey. Now, I just said 3 to 6 months is typical or average, I think, and the intention is of the live classes at the end of those 9 weeks, maybe spending another week or 2 to prepare and practice, and then go for it. So you know, a few years ago, I don't know if any of you like followed what I've done or whatever, but I did several iterations of what I call the Salesforce Bootcamp, which is all now in the MyClear Media Plus. But preceding all that, I polled my audience and asked, what are the greatest challenges to launching a cloud career? And lack of experience is always going to be number 1, but number 2 most greatest challenge is lack of time. And knowing how to structure your time and how to be accountable, because it's really easy to look back and go, wow, one of my goals for this year was to pass the admin certification, and I've not done that yet. And so committing to the live meeting times and doing that is a way of helping encourage people to block off that time. Now there is replays available, but that is part of the reason that I do that. And then also it just keeps me sharp, if you will, because it's really easy to forget. So good question, all of them. So anything else?
Mike, you mentioned that when there's a Salesforce update, they'll update the exam.
Yep.
You estimate when that will happen next? If we're studying now, should we write it by December?
No, they just updated it. They should have, at least. They have the schedules for so what you can do is you can look on Web Assessor to see, you're trying to register for an exam. Usually it'll say like SU 19 for summer 19 or WI 20 for winter 20. But with each release, how this works is, and I came up again, I almost lost all my certifications. This was a scary moment. So as I mentioned, my father passed away, upheaval, traveling back home, funeral, etc. Get back home on Sunday night and realize, and I had not checked my email. I get a lot of email. And one of them was a reminder to renew my certifications on Friday. Now, apparently there's a grace period there. I probably shouldn't share this too publicly, but I was able to salvage my certifications and not lose them all. And that's how I even came up with the name Silver Linings of a Cloud Career, because I was telling myself, because I was too busy to even look to see if I could renew, because we were going to a family dinner, blah, blah, blah. So I knew, okay, I'm not going to get to this till like around midnight tonight. And so worst case scenario is, hi, I'm Mike Wheeler and I teach Salesforce certifications and I have 0 certifications. You should learn from me. So, but the silver lining in that is if I did lose them all, I would have to retake them all, and that would help me to know firsthand exactly what it's like in 2019, 2020, and what's on the exam, et cetera, and maybe do some changes to the test. So I'm kind of pontificating here a little bit. What was the question?
If we were studying based on material that was only up to summer,
right?
Could we go back? How could we go and just look at what they updated for winter?
Right. So with each release, Salesforce releases huge release notes. Don't read all that. What you can do is you can look on Trailhead for the maintenance exams and look and see on Trailhead what specific questions are on those maintenance exams, even if you've not taken the certification. That will tell you the new content that may appear on the test. Now, my theory is they don't put brand new things on that exact release. What they will do, and this is my guess from a training background and how I would do it if I were Salesforce, and I have no insider knowledge, they don't tell me anything, is that with each release, my guess is that they test out new questions for new features as the ungraded questions, and they will do that over a release or two. And then I imagine what they do is it's what's called pill and stick, is you have 2 competing questions, basically. You see which performs the best. Now, if everyone's getting it right, that's a bad question. If everyone's getting it wrong, that's a bad question. They're looking for some sort of happy medium. And so they will have a question, have a competitor, and then they'll pill and stick. And you're always trying to improve those questions. And then after about 2 or 3 release cycles, after it's been in general availability for a while and it's been tested out as ungraded questions, those will make their way in. And so if you are studying summer 19, you're probably okay. You may just see some things that are brand new, but they're probably ungraded questions. So that's my theory on that. But you can look at Trailhead for the maintenance pieces of that to see what are the things that they are really highlighting on Trailhead for this release, knowing that those are probably the things that they're going to test on. All right, stunned silence. Anyone else?
Mike, I have a question. Do you see the format of the more common exams changing eventually? I'm thinking, for example, I've noticed the maintenance on the admin changed a couple of years ago, I think, to more of a hands-on challenge. Do you think that's a possibility in the future?
I think that eventually all certifications will be on Trailhead, and they probably will be more hands-on rather than multi-select. I think that'll be a good thing. but I don't know when that might be. I know that at Dreamforce last year, not this most recent one, but last year, they talked about how that was their goal. Was, if I remember correctly, I think it was in the admin keynote. I'd have to go back and review. But I'm just thinking about the things I was physically sitting in the room for at that time. And you see that some of the actual certifications are completed on Trailhead, like the Developer 2 certification is one that comes to mind. And I think that eventually it just makes sense that Salesforce would want to not have a third-party company, such as a web assessor, responsible for this. But that's a whole nother business model, to have a testing platform to where you can make it to where it's hard to game the system and not cheapen the certifications. So I think that that process is taking longer, is harder than they imagined. So I don't know if they will ever get there or not, but I think that there will at least be a component of that will be more hands-on, much like the Developer 2 certification. And perhaps it is, you have to pass multi-select questions, and then a piece of it is you have to complete some things on Trailhead. They're going to continue to push Trailhead for as much as they can, which makes sense. That's where this is heading.
Thank you.
Good questions. A lot of new questions, things that I've never been hit with. I like it. So, anyone else? All right, awesome. So I appreciated your time and attention. I know I just kind of went on for a long time there, but as I mentioned, we'll make the slide deck available, and you can always reach me at myclearmedia.com. You can connect with me on social, give me a shout out, whatever. And so I'm going to shut this out and let you guys eat some dessert, I guess. Does that sound good?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Bye-bye.